A bitter wind sweeps through the narrow, winding streets, tugging at the tattered cloaks of those brave enough to tread them. It carries with it the heavy scent of smoke, mingled with the sharp tang of rotting refuse clinging stubbornly to the cobblestones. The fog crawls low over the ground, curling around twisted doorways and shuttered windows, turning each corner into a shadowed trap where the imagination whispers horrors to the lonely traveler. Torches sputter and cough against the damp air, their flames twisting into grotesque shapes that leap across the uneven walls, momentarily revealing faces etched with fatigue, fear, and an almost forgotten despair. In the square, a woman hunches over a basket of blackened apples, her fingers brushing the bruised fruit as though handling fragments of her own body. Her eyes, sunken and hollowed by hunger and grief, scan the streets with a vigilance born of countless nights spent listening to the unseen. She murmurs a prayer under her breath, a dry sound swallowed almost immediately by the fog, as if the town itself refuses to hear the desperate. Around her, the townsfolk move in whispers, their voices low and guarded. Each step is measured, each word weighed, careful to avoid the ever-present gaze of the constable, who patrols like a specter, cudgel in hand, his shadow stretching long and unyielding across the wet stones. The air hangs heavy with disease, invisible yet relentless, slipping through the town like smoke through a fractured chimney. Fevered moans echo from hidden rooms, punctuated by the soft groans of carts rolling slowly through the night, carrying the sick to graves not yet dug, or perhaps to deaths that linger even longer in memory. Children, brittle and oddly fearless, dart between puddles of stagnant water, their laughter sharp, echoing off moss-stained walls as though daring the shadows to touch them. Their eyes reflect the world as it is, merciless, uncanny, and etched with the unspoken rules of survival. Here, every breath is borrowed, every morsel of food a prize, every glance a calculation of threat and alliance. Survival is ritual, a delicate dance choreographed by hunger, cruelty, superstition, and the quiet terror that each day may be the last. Symbols of the town's quiet violence linger like scars in the imagination. A rusted bell tilts precariously in its tower, the metal groaning with age and neglect, as if whispering warnings to those who pass beneath. The gallows lean awkwardly, wood splintering and warped, their shadow long enough to stretch into alleyways where no sun dares to reach. Iron chains hang from crooked hooks, their links blackened and pitted, telling stories of lives halted abruptly, of secrets hidden in plain sight, and of punishments meted with a casual cruelty. Each artifact murmurs of a history soaked in fear, a narrative of discipline that has hardened the hearts of those who remain. A lone black cat moves through the alleys, sleek and silent, disappearing into darkness as if carrying the souls of the lost. Its eyes glint briefly in the torchlight, twin coals of warning, and for a heartbeat, it seems as though it knows the secret language of the town, knows the places where the living and the dead brush shoulders in the mist, and where the unspoken debts of life are collected in silence. The cat pauses, tail flicking, ears pricked, before vanishing, leaving only the echo of its presence in the chill wind. Even the wind seems complicit in the town's quiet terror. It rattles shutters, whistles through chimneys, and scours the stones clean of comfort. The sound is both companion and predator, carrying whispers from one alley to the next, secrets of misdeeds, betrayals, and whispered prayers that will never be answered. The people have learned to move in rhythm with it, to anticipate its gusts, to mask their steps and soften their voices. For any noise can awaken the unseen, and any shadow can deliver sudden justice. Yet within this relentless despair, glimpses of fragile humanity persist. A candle flickers through a shuttered window, its warmth a trembling promise, defying the cold and the shadow. A child clings to a ragged doll, rocking it gently while the wind rages outside, imagining that love alone might be enough to shield them from the horrors beyond the door. A woman gathers scraps of bread, her hands shaking not just from cold, but from the enduring refusal to surrender entirely to despair. Each act, no matter how small, becomes a testament to life's stubborn insistence, a quiet rebellion against a world built on fear. Even the constable, that looming shadow of authority, is not immune to the fragility of this existence. Behind his grim exterior, there is fatigue, the weight of too many nights spent balancing duty and conscience, cruelty and mercy. His eyes, hard and watchful, occasionally betray a flicker of doubt, a memory of what it was once to sleep without fear of disease or hunger, or of the need to carry death in a cart through fogged streets. Yet he cannot falter. To do so would be to invite chaos, to allow the town's fragile order to collapse entirely into the consuming fog. Time in this town is measured not by hours, but by the pulse of survival. Dawn may break, and the sun may rise, but warmth is an abstract concept here. A thing glimpsed only through flickering candlelight, the whispered prayer of the faithful, or the rare shared smile between two exhausted souls. Nightfall is a constant threat, its shadows heavy with the unknown, yet also a veil beneath which the weary seek stolen moments of peace, scraps of tenderness, and brief, defiant joys that the day cannot grant. Every alley, every door, every stone is a witness to the unrelenting struggle between life and death, hope and despair, the living and the ghosts that haunt them. And so the town breathes, slowly, unevenly, a living entity built from fear and resilience in equal measure. Its heart beats in the silence of shuttered windows, the creak of splintering wood, and the muffled coughs of the sick hidden away in the corners of the streets. Shadows stretch long and restless across the cobblestones, merging with the fog, and whispering a story older than any inhabitant could recall. That life here is fragile, fleeting, and yet, impossibly, enduring. In the deepest folds of the night, the wind carries a final, almost intimate message. It rustles through chains, hums along the edges of leaning gallows, and brushes past the blackened apples, as if reminding all who dwell here that every step taken, every breath drawn, is a confession to the ghosts who never leave. And in that confession, there is both terror and a quiet, stubborn grace, a recognition that to survive is to bear witness, and that even in the cruelest streets, even beneath the most relentless dread, life insists upon itself. The scene closes on the fragile flicker of candlelight through a shuttered window. A warmth, small and wavering, glimmers in defiance of the cold, the disease, the hunger, and the shadows. It is a promise, not of safety, but of continuation. A delicate reminder that tomorrow, another wind will blow, another footstep will fall, and the dance of survival will continue, each breath a quiet rebellion against the darkness that seeks to consume it all. Rain fell like knives against the slick cobblestones, each drop hissing as it struck stone, metal, and wood alike. Mist rose from the gutters in ghostly coils, curling around the legs of the market stalls, seeping into every corner of the narrow streets. The cries of the crier were ragged, torn by fear and urgency, his voice cutting through the fog. "Taxes! Taxes! Bring forth your sons and your coins." He was swallowed almost immediately by the gray morning, leaving only the echo of his warning to linger like a threat. The market, once a place of chatter and color, now reeked of wet hay, smoke, and unwashed bodies, all punctuated by the coppery tang of blood from the butcher's stall. The knives there glistened, wet and hungry in the dim light, and the air seemed to tremble around them. In the cramped attic above, the young apprentice knelt over his rough-hewn block of wood. His hands shook, trembling not from the chill, but from the nameless dread that had settled over the town like a shroud. Each cut into the grain left faint spirals of sawdust, and each mark, small, crude crosses, was a plea, a fragile hope that some higher power might stave off the fever sweeping through his family, his friends, the strangers whose faces now haunted his dreams. He whispered prayers to saints he barely remembered, his voice trembling with the weight of helplessness. Outside, a rat scuttled along the gutter, pausing to sniff at the rain-slick stones before disappearing into a shadow. It was a small, defiant life moving through the same nightmare streets, as if daring any human to follow too closely. Soldiers moved through the town with measured precision, boots striking stone with a metallic clang that seemed to summon doom itself. Their armor glistened in the rain, yet offered no warmth, no protection from the invisible sickness that slithered through the alleys and doorways. They collected taxes, demanded obedience, searched for the men who had fled, hiding from lords who promised only chains and death. The townspeople melted into the shadows, clutching coins as though their value could shield them from fate, pulling cloaks tighter around shivering shoulders, whispering warnings to children too young to understand the weight of the world outside. The air was thick with suspicion, with grief, and with the silent, ever-present fear of betrayal. Inside the taverns, the smoke of burnt peat mingled with the damp, carrying with it the stories of disappearance, disease, and despair. Husbands spoke in hushed tones to wives, apprentices leaned close to merchants, all eyes darting to the door whenever the bell tolled. And toll it did, hollow, slow, each reverberation swallowing the space around it like the shadow of a scythe. One body after another was dragged through the streets, wrapped in linen, face hidden, leaving only the imprint of loss in its wake. The scent of damp stone and decay clung to everything, and every step, every breath, felt heavy with the knowledge that life here was fragile, tenuous. Children clung to their mothers, tiny hands pressed into wet skirts, and in their eyes was the silent understanding that the world had grown cruel beyond comprehension. Men clasped coins between trembling fingers, hoping a small offering might keep the soldiers' wrath at bay. Cloaks and hoods became shields, not from wind or rain, but from the eyes that watched, always watching, waiting to see who would falter first. Shadows moved independently in alleyways, not just shapes cast by torchlight, but dark insinuations of the unseen forces that governed daily life. Each gesture, turning a shoulder, shifting weight, clutching a bag, carried meaning, a story of fear written in movement. As night drew its heavy veil over the town, the rain slackened to a soft patter, yet the chill remained. Every hearth flickered, each flame a solitary defiance against the oppressive darkness pressing close. Families huddled together, sharing warmth, whispering prayers that might be answered, might not. The silence between these moments was loaded with expectation, with the kind of suspense that turns hearts to stone and spirits to smoke. Somewhere above, a single crow had taken its perch atop the spire, black feathers glistening with raindrops, eyes unblinking, eternal. It observed the frailty below, noting each failure, each misstep, recording the human tragedy as if inked onto the night itself. Even as the town exhaled a collective shiver, life persisted. The apprentice's sawdust clung to his knees, the soldier's boots sank slightly in puddles, and the merchant's whispered deals went unnoticed by the shadows that lingered at every corner. Each breath drawn in the damp, iron-tinged air was a quiet assertion that life still mattered, that the living had not entirely surrendered to the fever, to the cruelty, to the invisible hand that seemed to toy with them. Lanterns flickered in windows, casting golden rectangles onto the rain-soaked streets, islands of warmth in an ocean of misery. And yet, hope was not absent. It hid in small gestures, the apprentice's careful carving, the hushed prayers of a mother, the subtle nod of a merchant signaling that he had survived another day. It was fragile, tentative, like a candle struggling against the wind, but it existed. Somewhere in the heartbeat of the town, in the rhythm of boots, in the soft scuttle of rats, in the tolling of the bell, life insisted on moving forward. The crow shifted, feathers rustling like whispers, its black silhouette a silent sentinel over the town's quiet desperation. Below, doors remained locked, children clung to parents, and the rain continued its relentless chorus against the stone. Somewhere beyond the spire, the roads twisted into the unknown, carrying with them the promise of further darkness, but also of survival, resilience, and the faintest glimmer of tomorrow. In this suspended, rain-soaked world, each heartbeat was a defiance, each whispered prayer a spark, and the night waited, patient, for what would come next. Sunlight fights its way through layers of smog, piercing the ash-thick air like shards of fragile hope. It falls upon walls scarred by fire, blackened veins tracing stories of rage and ruin. Each brick, each splintered beam, hums with the memory of the chaos that tore this town from its own hands. The gates, patched with iron and oak, groan under the weight of centuries, yet offer little solace. Thieves slip through cracks with nimble fingers, and sickness prowls the streets as freely as the wind. The gates are not protection. They are a stubborn defiance against inevitability, a fragile veneer over the rot beneath. In the market square, the air is thick with smoke and the tang of vinegar. A man coughs into his sleeve, each rasping exhale tearing through the silence with a raw, ragged violence. Around him, others recoil instinctively, their eyes wide, reflecting the constant fear that gnaws at the edges of daily life. Children, skeletal and silent, scavenge among broken barrels and stagnant puddles, fingers grasping at scraps that might keep the emptiness in their bellies from devouring them whole. Their faces are small masks of hunger and resignation, mouths dry with the taste of yesterday's bread, skins slick with the grime of a city that knows no mercy. Above them, the smell of charred wood and smoke curls into every corner, mingling with the iron tang of blood and the harsh, acidic bite of vinegar. The gallows stands at the center of the square, a wooden sentinel in the theater of punishment. Its ropes swing lazily in the wind, a silent metronome marking the passage of lives cut short by cruelty, ignorance, or the slow justice of a town that feeds on fear. Public punishment is spectacle, ritualized terror that etches itself into memory. Faces press against the edges of the square, eyes wide, mouths tight with disbelief and fascination, as though watching despair might inoculate them against their own. A beggar leans against a splintered post, a tin cup rattling faintly in his grasp. Each coin, sparse and cold, rings out like a brittle rhythm of mercy in a place where kindness is a currency rarer than gold. His hands shake, a mixture of age and hunger, and the metal against metal is the only heartbeat in the quiet corners where no one dares tread. Candles flicker in the windows above, their tiny flames trembling against the drafty night. Shadows stretch and shrink over the faces pressed to the glass. Faces lined with fatigue, etched with worry, hollowed by sleepless nights and dreams abandoned. The bells toll, their clangs rolling through the streets with the weight of inevitability. Curfews, disease, lost souls, each resonant note a reminder that the town breathes only in rhythm with suffering. They echo off stone walls, bounce from alley to alley, and settle in the hearts of the living like a drumbeat of dread. A woman wipes sweat and soot from her brow, her hands blistered from labor. Her eyes, dark and luminous in the candlelight, hold the terror of tomorrow, a terror not born of imagination, but of certainty. She knows that the day ahead will be no gentler than the one behind her, that every step will scrape against the rawness of survival, that mercy is always borrowed and never owned. The streets twist in a labyrinth of fear, alleys folding into each other like secret wounds. Every corner tells a story of exile, betrayal, hidden sorrow, or love turned to ash. The wind carries them, whispers of vanished families, children who never returned from the fields, lovers whose embrace ended under the shadow of the gallows. It hums through the narrow spaces, carrying fragments of conversations never finished, of prayers uttered in desperation, of curses shouted into the unyielding air. Silence grows between the clamor, pressing against the skin like wet cloth, heavy and unyielding, whispering of the unmarked graves beneath cobblestones and behind closed doors. Smoke curls from chimneys with uneven rhythm, carrying the scent of damp wood and burnt grain. The bakery's ovens are empty, the hearths of the wealthy flicker, and yet the poor gather around cracks in walls and fires in the streets, staring into flames as though the dance of light might answer the questions they dare not speak. A child picks at a crust of bread found under a cart, eyes darting at every shadow, ears straining for the echo of boots or the scrape of a dagger. Hunger has sharpened every sense into a weapon, and yet even the sharpest senses cannot pierce the oppressive certainty of decay that clings to every building, every face, every heart. In a narrow alley, a man leans against stone, hands slick with grime, eyes hollow with unspoken sins. He remembers the day the plague came, the neighbors taken one by one, the screams swallowed by the fog. The echoes of their voices linger in corners, follow him with every step, and he wonders if memory is more cruel than death itself. Above him, shutters rattle against the wind, windows crackle with the heat of a dying day, and the town exhales the collective weight of suffering into the smog-thick air. Night falls slowly, dragging the light into pools of shadow. Candles flicker across faces, some weary, some angry, some almost lost to hopelessness. Footsteps echo in empty streets, doors shut with a finality that speaks of trust abandoned. The gallows looms against the dimming sky, its ropes swaying in the sighing wind, a reminder that justice and fear are inseparable here. Somewhere, a bell tolls again, slower this time, as if even the clock resists the rhythm of relentless despair. And yet, in the hush beneath the final tolls, there is a trembling thread of resilience. A mother whispers to her child, a prayer more for courage than for life. A merchant hides a loaf of bread for tomorrow, not knowing if tomorrow will come. The wind rustles through the streets, carrying with it the memory of those who lived, those who died, and those who refused to surrender completely. In the silence, there is a story unspoken, a story of persistence, of shadows clinging to the edges of light, of small acts of defiance that whisper, tomorrow is not yet lost. The town breathes its last light into the evening, smoke and ash curling skyward, and the labyrinth of fear tightens around its people. But even here, in the streets soaked with sorrow, in the alleys choked with whispers of the dead, there is a pulse that will drive the living forward, that will scrape hope from the bones of despair, and that will set the stage for what comes next. A reckoning, a revelation, a surge of life against the weight of history's cruelty. The shadows lengthen, wrapping the town in a shroud. Every door is a secret, every window a witness, every footstep a story waiting to be told. And somewhere in that darkness, a child looks up at the moon, eyes wide, heart trembling, as if sensing that even in the deepest rot, even in the thickest smoke, light can pierce. Tomorrow waits beyond the gates, beyond the smoke, beyond the inevitability. Tomorrow waits, unclaimed, for those daring enough to reach for it. A fog rolls off the river, curling through the timbered houses like a living thing, seeking cracks in the weathered beams and slipping under doors left ajar. The scent of wet wood and rot clings to everything, heavy and unyielding. Shadows stretch long across crooked streets, swallowing the clatter of a lone cart as its wheels scrape against cobblestones slick with mud. A dog yelps somewhere in the distance, but even its cries are smothered by the chorus of the sick and dying, their coughs and moans rising like a silent, unending chant. The town holds its breath, as if even the wind fears to disturb this fragile hush. Inside a dimly lit inn, a traveler sits hunched over a table, counting coins with painstaking care. His fingers are raw and cracked, but he does not flinch, for every careless movement draws eyes hungry for weakness. Whispers ripple like shadows across the room. A murder, just last night, left blood and terror in its wake. The words hang in the air, sticky and choking, mixing with the smell of mold, smoke, and the faint tang of iron from the hearth. Each patron's glance is measured, each gesture calculated. No one laughs here. Even the flames flicker nervously, afraid of catching the scent of suspicion. Children appear in the doorways, barefoot, thin, faces pale under the lantern glow. They watch quietly, learning early that smiles are rare and trust is a currency far too expensive to spend freely. Their eyes glimmer with curiosity, but also with fear. The knowledge that innocence is a fragile thing, quickly stripped away by hunger, disease, or the cruelty of those too desperate to care. Somewhere, a mother shushes a child, pressing a skeletal hand against its mouth, as if silence alone could stave off the shadow that hovers over every household. The constable moves through the slick streets, torch in hand, its flames sputtering against the damp air. Each puddle reflects a world inverted. The sky below, the flames above, a fleeting mirage of warmth in the chill of despair. Mud cakes boots and hems, a clinging reminder that the town is not tamed, only endured. Blood mixes with rainwater, forming streaks that glint like dark glass in the torchlight. The bell tolls for the dead, its sound resonant and hollow, each strike a punctuation to lives already lost. A ritual repeated so often that it has become ordinary, almost invisible, a grim heartbeat marking the passage of suffering. Amid the desolation, the townsfolk cling to symbols of endurance. Iron rings, worn smooth by generations of hands. Amulets carved from bone or stone. Crosses etched deep into doorframes or pressed against chests in silent prayer. Each talisman is a promise against the unseen, a shield against the hunger of disease, the caprice of fire, or the vengeance of men. In this town, faith is less a doctrine than a lifeline, an insurance against the cruel arbiters of chance. And yet, even as they carry these symbols, the people's eyes betray the truth, that no charm or cross can truly hold back what is inevitable. The wind moves through the alleys, carrying with it faint echoes of laughter, the fragile ghosts of those who once walked these streets. Their mirth is thin and brittle, a memory pressed into the walls like dried leaves. It reminds the living of their own tenuous grip on existence, each breath a borrowed thing, each heartbeat a fragile triumph. Doors creak, hinges groan, and shutters rattle as if the town itself remembers the faces lost to hunger, plague, or violence. In these streets, absence is a tangible weight, pressing down with the quiet insistence of inevitability. As dusk bleeds into night, smoke rises from chimneys like pale, skeletal fingers reaching toward a starless sky. The town's heartbeat quickens in shadows, a rhythm measured in quiet desperation and the low murmur of prayers. From behind shuttered windows, families huddle close to hearths, each flicker of fire a small defiance against the darkness outside. The smell of burning wood mingles with the scent of damp straw, forming a pungent reminder that life here is precarious, threaded through with danger and fleeting warmth. At the river's edge, the fog thickens, swallowing the water in a veil of silver. The surface is still, reflecting only the pale glimmer of torchlight and moon obscured by clouds. A solitary boat rocks gently, tethered to a post worn by decades of tides and neglect. Its timbers creak in protest, a sound that echoes like a whisper from the past, as if the river itself remembers all that has been lost to its currents. Somewhere beyond the bend, wolves stir, their eyes glinting like shards of obsidian in the mist. Hunger drives them closer, and the town sleeps with one eye open, knowing that danger is never far. Within the inn, the traveler finally stands, slipping coins into his pouch, his gaze meeting those of the barkeep. No words are spoken, silence is safer, but in that moment, understanding passes. Survival requires vigilance, cunning, and, sometimes, ruthlessness. The firelight dances across his weathered face, illuminating a weariness deeper than the lines of age or travel. He steps outside into the fog, boots sinking into mud, the torchlight of the constable reflecting off puddles ahead. Every step is deliberate, measured, as though each might determine whether he survives the night. And yet, life pulses stubbornly, insistently. Rats scuttle over stones. The scent of baking bread drifts faintly from some hidden oven. A dog barks, and a shutter rattles in response. It is a town held together not by strength or wealth, but by the fragile threads of endurance, woven through generations who have learned to fear, to hope, and to carry on. In the murk and gloom, eyes watch, hands clutch amulets, and hearts beat with quiet resolve. Even amidst shadows, even in the relentless embrace of death, the living persist. The fog swirls, heavier now, blanketing streets and roofs in a soft, suffocating gray. Figures move ghost-like through the mist, torches reflected in pools of water, footsteps muffled on the wet earth. Somewhere, a bell tolls again, slow and deliberate, marking another soul lost, another night survived. And as the town exhales beneath the weight of its own history, a question lingers in the air. What is left for those who remain? The river moves silently, carrying secrets of the past, while the fog curls, folds, and stretches over the town like a shroud, promising that dawn will come, but that night still holds dominion over all who linger in its embrace. The sun sinks beneath the bruised horizon, spilling its dying light across crooked rooftops. Crimson streaks smear the shingles like fresh wounds, a reminder that this town remembers every blow, every life spilled in silent alleys. Smoke from chimneys rises in sluggish spirals, mingling with the smell of sweat, unwashed bodies, and wood smoke. A scent so thick it seems to cling to the cobblestones themselves. Each breath is heavy, laden with the residue of hunger, of fever, of quiet desperation. From the tower at the town's edge, the bell tolls, its voice deep and resonant, cutting through the dusk like a blade. It measures the passing of hours in grief, the tally of souls lost to disease, to famine, to the merciless whims of men. The sound lingers, echoing against walls that have absorbed centuries of sorrow, bouncing off corners and narrow passageways where shadowed figures crouch and watch, listening for the rhythm of danger. In a narrow alley, damp and pungent with yesterday's refuse, a woman kneels. Her hands are red and raw, rubbing at a floor that knows no mercy, soaking in water already fouled. Her eyes, weary and shadowed, glimmer with a quiet, defiant sorrow, a flame that refuses to be snuffed out by the filth and cruelty around her. She hums a faint, broken tune, though the melody is swallowed quickly by the hum of the town, the distant clatter of boots, the scrape of a cart over stone. Children huddle beneath tattered cloaks, faces pale from hunger and fear, wide eyes reflecting the dying light. They study the streets as if reading scripture, learning the language of caution, memorizing the silent threats hidden in every shadow. A loose shutter rattles. A dog yelps somewhere behind a fence. A child flinches, fingers gripping a thin blanket, heart pounding like the bell that marks their fragility. Innocence here is a fragile currency, spent quickly and often stolen before it can be fully realized. Soldiers patrol with torches, their boots thudding against wet cobbles like the measured beat of a giant heart, cold and relentless. The light from the flames dances across their armor, glinting metal that has known cruelty as intimately as the town's own narrow walls. Their presence is a reminder. Law is but a veneer here, thin as the wash of paint on a shutter, beneath which chaos waits patiently. Merchants call their wares, voices raw and cracked, carrying a weary melody that speaks of survival more than prosperity. Coins exchanged are few, bartered silently in fear, in hope, in grim necessity. The town itself seems alive, exhaling a rhythm of unease. A sigh that sweeps through crooked lanes, brushes over shuttered windows, slips into hidden courtyards. Here, superstition clings to life like dew on winter grass. A broken statue in the square leans slightly, accusing, as if it had witnessed every theft, every betrayal. A fraying rope dangles from the bell tower, swaying gently as if marking not only the passage of time but the fragility of what remains. On the walls, a raven perches, black wings folded, eyes glinting with the knowledge of scavengers, survivors, and watchers. And yet, within this tapestry of despair, threads of resilience shimmer. A shopkeeper sets a small loaf of bread outside his shuttered door, hoping no one will see, or hoping someone does. A young boy, sneaking past the patrol, grips a shard of chalk and traces shapes on a wall. A dragon, a horse, a sun barely rising. Small rebellions, quiet acts of humanity, slip between the cracks of this merciless place, offering fleeting warmth against the cold machinery of survival. Inside homes, the candlelight flickers across pale faces. Conversations are whispers, carried just beyond the walls, heavy with caution. The fever spreads. Someone mutters, voice trembling. Another replies, softer. And yet we endure. Endurance here is sacred, more precious than gold. To exist, to wake each morning, to breathe in the smoke-heavy air, is an act of quiet heroism. Families cling to each other, knuckles white around the hands they can still hold, resisting the relentless erosion of hope that seeps through broken doorways and shattered windows. Night deepens, folding itself over the town like a funeral shroud. Shadows stretch longer, absorbing what little warmth remains. The smell of damp, of rot, and of unwashed flesh thickens, intertwining with the scent of wood smoke and cooking fires. Somewhere, a bell tolls again, reminding the living that the dead are many and that the living carry their stories forward by sheer stubbornness. From the rooftops, the stars pierce the gloom, fragile and indifferent. A wind snakes down the alleys, carrying with it the whispers of the lost, the rustle of leaves, the distant clink of a chain dragged across stone. Every corner hides a secret, a stolen loaf, a silent prayer, a dagger slipping through a belt. Here, danger is constant, omnipresent. Life is precious precisely because it is so tenuous, so easily extinguished. A door creaks open, spilling dim candlelight onto the street. A woman steps out, basket in hand, counting breaths as if each inhale might be her last. Her eyes meet the shadows, and for a moment, a flicker of understanding passes between her and the darkness. That in this place, everything is measured, every step weighed against consequence. Behind her, the town hums, a living entity stitched together from fear, superstition, and silent perseverance. And yet, even in the chill there is poetry. A broken feather flutters from the roof, spinning on the wind, a tiny symbol of freedom in a town hemmed by despair. Somewhere a child laughs quietly, barely audible, a sound fragile but defiant against the relentless night. Somewhere else, an old man traces the letters of a forgotten prayer in dust, hope riding on the tip of his finger. Survival is not just endurance. It is a statement of will, a whisper of resistance, a claim to life in a world designed to strip it away. The night gathers the living and the lost alike, merging them into a tapestry of unseen cruelty and fleeting mercy. Each breath drawn is heavy with memory, with the knowledge of what has been lost and what must be carried forward. Shadows twist along the walls, embracing both the gentle and the violent, the tender and the merciless. In this town, life and death share the same streets, the same narrow passageways, the same heavy air that presses down on every shoulder and bends every spine. And as the first hint of moonlight slips over the rooftops, pale and trembling, it illuminates the resilience hidden in plain sight. A young girl presses her hand to the cool stone of a well, whispering a wish she does not fully understand. Somewhere a bell tolls once more, marking the hours of a world in motion, a world where despair and hope are inseparable, where every shadow is alive with possibility, and where the breath of the living honors the memory of those who have passed. Here, in the bruised twilight, the town breathes as one, a slow, uneasy rhythm of survival and silent endurance. The cobblestones glisten wet under torchlight, and the wind carries the mingled scent of sweat, smoke, and fleeting mercy. Every footstep, every glance, every whispered prayer is a testament. Here, life is precious because it is fleeting, and the night, indifferent as it may be, has yet to claim the will of the living. And so, the darkness folds in, soft yet heavy, preparing the stage for the next day, the next struggle, the next whispered act of courage in a place that refuses to forget. The town exhales, quiet but unbroken, carrying its stories forward, each one a thread in the tapestry of enduring humanity, waiting for the first light to arrive again. Frost bites the edges of wooden shutters, tracing jagged white patterns across the splintered boards, as dawn creeps over a town carved from stone and sorrow. A pale light slips across rooftops, catching the curling smoke that rises in thin spirals from chimneys, carrying the scent of meager breakfasts, stale bread, watered-down gruel, and the faint tang of sickness that clings to every corner. The town exhales in a rhythm of quiet suffering, each breath a whispered prayer, each cough a subtle warning of mortality lingering too close. In the smithy, the blacksmith hammers iron with a rhythm as relentless as the winter wind. Sparks erupt from the anvil like fleeting fragments of hope, their brief glow swallowed by shadowed walls. Each strike rings through the street beyond, a sound that carries the weight of survival in a place where despair is common currency, where strength is measured in calloused palms and bowed shoulders. The hammer falls again and again, each clang a heartbeat, a reminder that life continues only because the living insist upon it. Outside, in the market square, the air is thick with muted voices. Merchants lean against rough-hewn stalls, speaking in hushed tones about deaths unrecorded, fires that devoured homes and memories, and disappearances that left only empty doorways. The wind threads through the alleys, tugging at the ragged cloaks of children who huddle beneath their fraying folds, seeking warmth where none is freely given. Their eyes are wide, luminous with a fragile understanding that the world is capricious and cruelty is often just a breath away. The sound of a bell tolling drifts across the town, hollow and inevitable. Each clang falls like a stone into the heart of the morning, measuring time not in joy or progress, but in absence. Mothers clutch their infants closer. Men pause mid-step with fists clenched, eyes fixed on nothing and yet everything. The bell does not merely mark the hour. It counts the losses, the hunger, the silence of those who have vanished. It is a reminder that survival is precarious, that each day is borrowed, each night a gauntlet to be endured. Hands rise in the frost to press together in prayer, fingers stiff and pale. Cloaks are drawn tight, collars turned up against the bite of cold and the glare of a world unkind. Eyes avert cruelty and disease alike, scanning the streets for signs of both, tracing the shadows that seem to writhe independently of their owners. Rusted keys dangle from weathered doorways, swinging in the wind like pendulums of fragile security. They offer no real protection, only the illusion of safety in a town governed as much by chance as by human cruelty. Shadows stretch across the stone walls like ink bleeding into water, curling into corners, pooling in doorways. The town itself seems alive in memory, remembering every act of desperation, every sin carved into the bones of its streets. Cobblestones are worn smooth by feet that carried grief and hunger, by children who ran from unseen dangers, by merchants who bartered scraps for fleeting reprieve. The walls are not mute. They whisper histories of suffering, of small victories claimed only to be snatched away by famine, fire, or fear. A bell tolls again, this time echoing off the distant hills, answering the first with a low, mournful voice. Smoke rises from hearths and ovens, curling into the gray sky, carrying whispers of meals that will never satisfy, of warmth that will never endure. In the narrow alleys, the wind whistles with a voice uncannily human, a chorus of wails from the abandoned, the forgotten. It passes over broken gates and shuttered windows, threading through the gaps in the stone like a skeletal finger. By midday, the market empties slowly, the echoes of conversation fading like mist. A dog whines somewhere in a courtyard, the sound sharp and lonely. A merchant sweeps ash from the hearth, watching the sparks rise, knowing that these too will fade, as everything else does. Hunger gnaws quietly, invisibly, shaping gestures and moods. Hands tremble while exchanging coins, faces pale under the scrutiny of the indifferent sun. Eyes shifting toward doors that will not open, toward alleys where shadows move too quickly to follow. The blacksmith pauses, sweat freezing on his brow, listening to the hollow echo of the hammer. He considers the iron on the anvil, its weight familiar, necessary, comforting in its predictability. Yet even the iron carries reminders of mortality, the weapons forged for defense, for crime, for execution. Each blade is a witness, each horseshoe a testament to endurance. Yet none can protect fully from hunger, disease, or the indiscriminate cruelty of fate. Evening falls slowly, draping the town in a gray shawl that blurs edges, softens faces, and sharpens fear. Lanterns flicker to life, small islands of light in a growing sea of darkness. Smoke spirals from fireplaces, carrying the aroma of stew and charred wood. The streets grow silent, save for the occasional clatter of a shutter, the distant bark of a hound, the whisper of the wind threading between houses like a living thing. The town braces itself, knowing that tomorrow will demand endurance again, that night brings no comfort, only preparation for the next trial. Children huddle together beneath ragged blankets, sharing warmth and the quiet terror of anticipation. Their whispered games are shadows of laughter, tiny protests against the world's indifference. Mothers watch, faces etched with lines carved by grief and cold, calculating how long the day's provisions will last, how many steps they can take before exhaustion demands surrender. Fathers return from labor, their hands raw, their eyes weary, their hearts heavy with the same questions that have haunted every generation. Who will survive? Who will vanish? Who will remember? The streets empty further, leaving the town to the guardianship of flickering lanterns and the wailing wind. Shadows stretch and twist across the stone like living ink, tracing paths only the night remembers. The smoke rises, curling into the dimming sky, carrying the scent of burnt wood, of meals consumed, of fires that mark both survival and loss. The bell tolls one final time for the day, deep and solemn, echoing across rooftops, across memory, across the fragile hearts of those who remain. By nightfall, silence is near total. The town holds its breath beneath the frost, under the weight of stone and sorrow, under the vigilant gaze of unseen watchers. The blacksmith's hammer rests, the children sleep fitfully, and the wind continues its lament, whispering through the alleyways, slipping through shutters, carrying the scent of smoke, of despair, of fleeting hope. In this silence, one feels the town itself listening, waiting, remembering. Each shadow, each rusted key, each shutter rattling in the cold, holds the memory of what has passed and the fragile promise of what endures. And as the first stars appear over the rooftops, pale witnesses to the day's endurance, one cannot help but wonder. When the dawn comes again, will the town rise with it, whole yet scarred, or will the shadows claim a little more of what humanity still clings to? The answer lies somewhere in the quiet, in the spaces between the stones, between the lanterns, between the hammer strikes, waiting to be revealed in the slow, unyielding passage of time.